We usually do kitchen table astronomy from the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Salman Hameed's house. But because you, Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe, are also behind Kainaat Studios, which is bringing science to Southeast Asia, or is it South Asia?
South Asia.
It's bringing science to South Asia, including specifically Pakistan and India. Your home country and its neighbor have been in the news an awful lot lately, but we are going to apply the scientific method that we talk about here so frequently to this global political issue that hits close to home for you here in Amherst.
Right. So just some context. Last week was a bit tough. And I think this was one of those cases where the two countries, and if people don't know that, just as a reminder, both have over 150 nuclear weapons each.
But despite the fact that they don't acknowledge this?
No, they do. They do.
Both acknowledge it?
I think they had tests in the 1990s, and so now it's more about how many they have, and so they both have more than 150, and this time they came very close to an all-out war. And so that's the first part of it.
And I'll stop you right there to say that the Northampton-based physician, Dr. Ira Helfand, who's been part of two organizations that have won the Nobel Peace Prize, has said many times, including on our show, that a small-scale nuclear war, even just between India and Pakistan, could cause catastrophic global devastation.
Right, and it's not. It's an understatement. It's not going to be good for anyone. I think that is true, but certainly complete destruction of people over there
and people globally. There could be a nuclear winter, depending on the size of it. That kind of stuff that you heard so much about in the 80s and prior.
And so why this particular incident almost went out to all-out war? There was a terrorist attack in Indian-held Kashmir. So Kashmir is sort of like a disputed territory between India and Pakistan. Half of it is with India administered, and half of it is in Pakistan. It's United Nations that said that it should be people have to figure out the solution, but it has lasted since 1947 when the two countries were partitioned. And so basically Kashmir has been in dispute since 1948 when it got partitioned. Now, after terrorist attack, this happened a couple of weeks ago. India blamed that the groups that behind that were based in Pakistan. Pakistan denied it. And India said, well, we are going to attack, these terrorist camps and so on and so forth. So these type of things have happened in the past. These type of blame games also happened. But this time, what was different was that India attacked. But usually, if in the last few years, when something like this has happened, it has happened only within the territory of Kashmir, which is disputed. But for the first time, when India attacked, they also attacked in mainland Pakistan. And that was a departure from earlier times, and then it wasn't clear what's going to happen. And when this attack happened, and there's a lot of media frenzy associated with that as well in particular, and I'm not saying that because I'm from Pakistan, but people also have mentioned that the government of Modi is a right-wing government.
The government of India, yeah.
The government of India. And the media also was egging it on, looking for revenge, looking for war. On the Pakistan side, actually, this wasn't, people actually have not been looking for war. That has not always been the case, but certainly in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, Pakistan economically has not been doing well. And their reaction when the tensions were high, so terrorist attacks happened a couple of weeks ago, and there was an expectation that India is going to take some action. In Pakistan, actually, there were a lot of memes going on. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times as well about memification of war, that was partly what's taking place. And those were really funny because they were self-deprecating. There were a lot of humor in it, again, from the Pakistan side. For example, Pakistan has a lot of loans from the World Bank and IMF and things like that. And they said, well, if you do take on us, you will have to take our loans as well. And so on and so forth. So there were a lot of memes about cricket and things like that. But when the attacks happened, when India crossed and attacked mainland as well, then it intensified, and Pakistan did claim to down a couple of Indian fighter planes as well. So that was a big deal. Again, there's a lot of dispute about how many. Pakistan claimed actually 5 or 6. India did not acknowledge any, but it looks like that there are like these French high-tech planes, like 1 or 2 were down, at least 1. There's a wreckage also, and so that, and which in itself is a really interesting aspect, because a lot of people are saying that, well, this is sort of like having a dogfight with Pakistan has Chinese planes, and these were French top-of-the-line planes, and so
that's because all the U.S. planes just fell off aircraft carriers into the ocean.
Well, that is true here, but so that was an interesting aspect, and which was a little bit unexpected. So people are also interested. Other militaries are also interested of how did that happen, why did that happen, and there's a real battle going on, war going on, impacting real people. But for militaries and for other countries, this is also a live demonstration of technologies. So people are also looking at, well, wow, Chinese technology is really sophisticated, and so there is a whole element of discussion in there. I don't want to focus on that, but what I want to focus on that while this was going on, then last Friday, almost it looked like things have escalated quite a bit. So right in the first initial incursion or attack from India onto the mainland, one city in Pakistan and a couple of sites in Kashmir, Pakistan claimed to have downed a plane, and it looked like there was shelling going on, which is not that extraordinary. But the question was that how is it going to tamp down? How is it going to de-escalate? But instead of de-escalation, then on Friday, it seemed like it's going to go in a completely different direction. Because I think, again, there is a lot of fog of war, there's a lot of misinformation, but it looked like Pakistan had also made some attacks on Indian territory, because Pakistan had said, well, we have to respond as well. But then, while some negotiations were going on, 3 of the air bases in Pakistan, so these are the military air bases, were hit by missiles. Now that was a big deal, because these air bases were, first of all, those are major ones, but also one of them is near the military headquarters in Pakistan, and near the capital in Islamabad. So this air base was in Rawalpindi. My family actually lives in Rawalpindi. So you say, oh, there is a missile attack there. So that changes the equation quite a bit. It was unclear how Pakistan is going to respond, and Pakistan apparently did respond with a flurry of missiles going the other way. Now, just to again give you a context of what is happening in this connected world, one of the producers of Kainaat, Roshan Bukhari, who lives in Lahore, you never know what's going on in the fog of war, but then he sends me a text and he says, by the way, it looks like there's going to be a full-out war, because this is what I can see from my rooftop. And he sent me a short video that had smoke coming out, sort of like, coming out from some place, and there was an explosion that had happened beforehand. And that was real. And I was like, okay, so he's in Lahore. Initially, I thought he was somewhere else. I was like, are you visiting somewhere? He said, no, I'm at my own rooftop. I'm just looking at it over there. That meant it was near Lahore or in Lahore. There was another one. There was a confirmation that was in Rawalpindi. And so it looked like that this may actually escalate out of control. Now, as I've mentioned about the nuclear weapons itself, because if there is an all-out war, Pakistan is much smaller than India. It has a huge disadvantage in conventional weapons. And Pakistan has said, well, we are going to defend ourselves. And if we have to defend it with nuclear bombs, we are going to defend it at the expense of basically both sides destroying themselves. I mean, that's another type of deterrent. So that's where things were scary. And then it looks like the U.S. intervention came in as well. Marco Rubio joined in the conversations, and then there is a ceasefire since Saturday. But for a few hours, it looked like it's going to completely going to be an all-out war.
We have been somewhat critical of the Trump administration in this second incarnation in response to budgets. We mentioned last week the NEA funding that has been cut at Amherst Cinema. We're going to have a big conversation on Wednesday with all sorts of different organizations that have had their funding cut. But you and Pakistan are crediting the Trump administration with helping to make this ceasefire possible.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we can say that, sort of like, credit where credit is due. I mean, in the sense that here, it didn't look like there were other countries that tried to lower down the temperature. So Iranian foreign minister actually was shuttling between Pakistan and India. Saudis were also involved, but it wasn't going down. And President Trump, he made a statement, and again, the bar is pretty low, I should add, when we are talking about these things. India and US are pretty close allies, and after the terrorist attack happened in the Indian administered Kashmir, and then later on as well, US could have taken a one-sided approach, the way US has done that, for example, with Israel and Palestine. And that would have poured kerosene on the fire, because there was a lot of war hysteria in the Indian media, and it looked like India is going to attack. So if the president had come out and given a carte blanche to Prime Minister Modi, that could have been detrimental. But instead, President Trump came out, and his tweet or truth or whatever it comes out, and he said, these guys should tamp down these things, and this conflict over Kashmir has been going on for thousands of years. Okay, now we can laugh about that. No, it's not thousands of years, because Pakistan and India as countries, separate countries, did not exist for thousands of years. It's only since 1947, so on and so forth. But it sort of like set the tone a little bit. And then when the conflict really started to escalate, J.D. Vance, this is also, I think, reflects where different people are within the administration. So J.D. Vance actually, right before the full the escalation happened, J.D. Vance said, what is happening in Pakistan and India is none of our business. And that was the wrong message to a certain degree. But apparently, Marco Rubio got involved quite heavily, because it looked like that this may escalate quite further. While when the attack on the bases, Air Force bases, happened in Pakistan, and Pakistan retaliated it appears quite heavily, the Prime Minister of Pakistan also announced a meeting of, I think it's the National Command Authority or something like that, which actually deals with nuclear weapons. Now, that meeting, it didn't happen, but I think the fact that he announced that we are going to have that meeting in itself served as a deterrence. And so Marco Rubio got seriously involved, and it seems like that there was a full day or more of various negotiations on both sides to actually de-escalate that. And Pakistan then said, that Marco Rubio helped quite a bit, but ultimately it was the president that helped seal the deal. And in some sense, politically, I think that was a smart thing, because President Trump wants to take credit for whatever is happening, and that credit was given.
He wants a Nobel Peace Prize, and I think go for it. Yeah. What could go wrong? If he's going to try to enact peace, and the Nobel Association would honor him with that, they're going to be watching the kind of ways that he goes about trying to enact peace. Seems like a good goal to have.
Right. This is a weird thing to say, but but because President Obama won the Peace Prize, which again, I actually have objections to.
Me too.
The way sort of like drones and things like that.
Well, they tried to give him the Nobel Peace Prize because he was saying he was going to disarm the nuclear arsenal of the world. And it was a way to be like preemptively say, this is good, do it. And then he never did it. And also the attacks with drones and became much more mainstream in terms of using that. So that's a whole other thing. But yeah, if for whatever reason, if that could be in a positive sense, I don't have a problem with that. But talking about drones, one of the scarier part of this conflict is the massive use of drones. So India used Israeli drones in there that were in major cities attacking in Pakistan or coming to in Pakistan, and then they were testing basically air defenses, and Pakistan was using Turkish drones going the other way. So to me, that actually is the modern warfare that's going to be very tricky, because your threshold of going to another country or engaging with something, that actually gets quite a bit lower. But all that said, this is a long way to say what I really want to talk about is skepticism, because there was so much misinformation from both sides that it was like, how do you figure out what is the right information? How do you figure out what is the right information?
And it is very hard, because you get something on social media, and of course you are hyper alert to that. First of all, you shouldn't believe that. especially if it's coming from somebody that so for example, from a Pakistan side, if Pakistan has done this, well, you should be skeptical about it because you are more inclined to believe in that. So what I would do is look at Pakistani newspapers and the more trustworthy ones. There is a full spectrum over there as well, and then triangulate. Now we are living the internet age, so the positive thing is that you can also look at Indian newspapers and you look over there and there was a completely different world. And then you look at it's like, oh, okay. And then what I would have to do is look at BBC, Guardian, New York Times. You'd usually be a little bit behind, but look at BBC, Guardian, and even read within it what they are saying. Is this something coming from just a spokesperson of Pakistani army or the Indian army, or is it something more? And of course, like I said, direct information was also coming from individuals. Hey, this is from outside, somebody that you know. Otherwise, hey, I have seen this clip. There's a clip floating around. Usually those clips were from many other places, from previous wars or from wars at some other places, and they think this is what has happened. And this skepticism, we talk a lot about it within the sciences as well, claims for life elsewhere, aliens, UFOs, or whatever. You have to be skeptical. That's the same kind of skepticism that actually is helpful in this context as well. Especially, again, I don't want to single out Indian media in that sense. Pakistan media is not that better. But in this particular case, Indian media on one of the days actually really went on and announced that Karachi had fallen, Lahore had fallen, that the Pakistan's
big Pakistani cities, if you're not familiar with that
cities
geography,
and Islamabad that surrendered, or the military head was under arrest. I mean, these were things that would be easily verifiable very soon, and so whoever was spreading it would know that it would get verified. And secondly, news organizations at least should not be going further and actually double checking it. Pakistan also made some claims, although they were not as outlandish, but they had claims, for example, that they have shot down some planes and the pilot has been captured. And again, that pilot never materialized, but it was showed up in various places. So there's already a fog of war, but then there is this deliberate misinformation that is now very common and can be spread very easily. How do you deal with that? And I think this thinking of how scientists deal with skepticism in terms of the news sources, that you look at it and you go like, is it really too good to be true? What is the source that is coming from? Be skeptical. Sometimes some of those things may be true, because there was also a dispute about whether Pakistan has shot down any of the planes or not. But then it turns out, and again, I followed that too, the Guardian also reported, other organizations also reported, French plane was from France. They also made a claim that at least one plane has been down. There has been somebody. Okay, we can say one. Pakistan claimed that it was more than 5. Well, we don't know they're more than 5 or not, but at least we can say, okay, one was down, but India didn't acknowledge any. So you can actually try to triangulate what the actual information is, but it takes a lot of effort. But it's worth it, because misinformation, especially in times like this, can actually cause real damage. And also, you want to know what is happening. So I think scientific skepticism, which is about aliens, UFOs, anything, claims of life, that's the same tools in some sense you can use for figuring it out what is really happening. There will always be doubts, there will always be a fog of war, but you can at least get a little bit closer. And sometimes you will say, we don't know. And there are a lot of claims that are made in there which we go like, yeah, we don't know, because Pakistan made claims, they're not verifiable. India made claims, those are not verifiable. So we can actually move along from that.
I love it. Triangulate your sources.
Exactly. And one other thing I would say, because again, we want to have a better world. What is really needed is more conversation across the border, not siloing out, not creating bigger battles or bigger walls in that sense. And I think one of the things that has been lacking in the last 10 years or so has been really, India has shut out Pakistan from various diplomatic stuff, including, for example, things like cricket. So the Indian Premier League, which is the world's richest league in cricket, and it's very prestigious. but none of the Pakistani players can participate in it. That's a governmental decision. And in the same way, there was a tournament recently in Pakistan that was a Champions League of cricket, and it was hosted by Pakistan. It was hosted in Pakistan, but Indian team refused to travel there. So their games were on a neutral side. I think that is detrimental because you need more conversations with ordinary people, because in all of this, and we've just talked about Pakistan and India, we have not even talked about that none of this has a voice from Kashmir. I mean, what do Kashmiris want? Well, nobody wants to talk about that. So we need voices from Kashmir. But across the border, let people have more conversations. And we are trying to do that with Kainaat. And Kainaat, some of our videos, especially for kids, we have a host, one from Pakistan and one from India. Because we think in this age, when even if you have a physical border, you can still have conversations across from it. And for one of the things that why astronomy is best for these type of things is because both people, whether you are on this side of the border or that side of the border, you look at the same sky. You look at the same events that are happening in the sky, and you can identify the same constellations and same planets at the same time. So astronomy really can be a best place, one of the best things in the sense of talking about peace across the countries, across the borders.